Did anyone else in the early 2000s grow up playing that DVD board game Atmosfear hosted by
The Gatekeeper.
Yeah, that guy. Creepy, entertaining, and sassy. I thought I was the only one who had ever heard of this game, and then after diving into research online, it turns out it is alive and well with gamers playing it on YouTube with their friends. What really caught my attention revisiting this game as an adult, though, was recognizing the performance of the actor playing the Gatekeeper. I was like, who is this guy? Have I seen him in anything else? I have to find who he is. So after some internet sleuthing, a friend was able to track him down. I reached out to him on Instagram, and the Gatekeeper himself, David Whitney, agreed to have a chat about his experience making Atmosfear. Here it is. Hi, David. Thank you so much for joining me today and being here to talk about your experience working on Atmosfear.
Hi, Sydney. It's very nice to be talking to you about Atmosphere, which is,
Yeah,
I don't even know how many years ago now, but I'm sure you'll know.
yeah, I know. I did do a little bit of research before jumping into this interview, and it's the 20th anniversary this year. It said 2003. I don't know exactly when it was filmed, of course, but yeah. It's amazing.
Wow, 20 years. Okay.
This board game for me is very nostalgic in that I grew up playing it. I have no idea where my parents got it. It just showed up in my home one day and became
Right.
a core memory. Your performance is like ingrained in my upbringing. And this, I don't believe it's being currently reproduced, but my sister for Christmas this year found a copy, and I now definitely own Atmosphere again, and it's just a staple among friends to play now and continue sharing the joy that is Atmosphere.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear, because you do these things and you never really know, how it's received or what happens with it. So it's really nice to know. I mean, I did actually speak to a chap in England recently who's doing his thesis on it at film school, and he's the same. He just played it all through his teenage years and loved it and was really obsessed with it, which is so nice to hear.
So I was going to ask, how did this job even come about? Was it a casting call through an agency? How
Yeah,
did it
it
find
was
you?
just like every other job. A casting agent in Sydney sent out the brief. I don't know how many they saw, but I had went in and did the audition, and I suppose did more or less, um, you know, the accent or whatever that I use in the performance. Yeah, we did that, and that was it. So it was relatively. It wasn't actually a long process. I remember doing the one audition in person, and then that was it. Next thing I know, I'm off having a head cast made and all that sort of stuff for the prosthetics.
Wow, 'cause I was definitely going to ask about that. Because, I mean, speaking of it being 20 years, the makeup effects still hold up very well. They look really
Yeah.
good. So I was going to ask, yeah, what that process was like for makeup.
It was about. I had two wonderful ladies, and I do apologise because I can't remember their names now. It's 20 years ago, but two really fabulous ladies, and I think we spent about 3 hours each morning applying the prosthetics, and they just did an incredible job. And it was a two-person job, gluing all of that, and then a lot of painting, and then a lot of maintenance during the day, because it was once we started filming, because there's so many inserts in it, so many grabs that the gatekeeper has, and there was a lot of talking, so they'd start to come away from the mouth, and they need to glue it up and all that sort of stuff. But they were fantastically attentive and did a brilliant job. Then there'd also be about an hour at the end of the day to then take it off, and do that and look after the skin, because I think we shot it basically in 1 week,
Oh,
maybe a
wow. Okay.
little bit more. But so the issues in terms of staying healthy with my skin and also healthy vocally, because it was a lot of, and there's a lot of shouting and a lot of text. Um, so we really had to sort of manage that and pace ourselves so that I was able to sustain it so that we could get through all the material that we needed. And also my eyes, strangely enough, were the one thing that started to go, because all the inserts that you read were written for me, obviously, by a wonderful writer, and I do remember his name, Brett Walton. So, but there were thousands of them, so I'm reading them from an auto cue, and after a while, the eyes started to get pretty tired. So at one point during the week, say about Thursday, I can't really remember, but I was quite concerned because I was driving in the dark, because I started makeup at probably 5 a.m. and I just couldn't read the street signs. My eyes were
Wow.
really defocused. And so the
Yeah.
producers were also quite concerned when I mentioned that. So we had to wait until after 9 a.m., by which time I had all my makeup on, my prosthetics on, and they put me in a car and we went into the middle of the city of Sydney to the optometrist who'd made the contact lenses. To get out of the car, cross one of the busiest streets in Sydney in my full prosthetic,
Oh
go
my
in, have an eye
gosh.
test. The optometrist assured me that it was just fatigue and that everything would return to normal once we sort of stopped, and that's in fact what happened. But yeah, it was kind of a weird thing to be out in the streets of Sydney
Oh,
as the gatekeeper.
totally. That what a sight. That would have been so fun to like stumble across. But like you mentioned, there are quite a few inserts, which makes this unique. This playing the game such an experience is that it's on a randomizer. So every time you play, you're seeing new clips and being surprised by new experiences compared to, like I mentioned, just looking a little bit more into the history of what Atmosphere was and that it was a VHS experience board game previously,
Yeah,
which I can't even imagine now having grown up with this one that the VHS, you're getting the same thing kind of every time. This, every
yeah,
time, it's so fresh. So I just can't imagine how much content and different clips you had to film. Just, yeah, it
yeah.
was
It
a
was to
ton.
say thousands, and each variation for each character, and they were all slightly different. So depending whether you rolled this and whether you got a Baron Samedi or one of the other characters, each of them had to have a variation. So there were thousands, which is, as I say, why it took about 6 or 7 days, I think, to complete it.
Mm-hmm. And how much direction did they give you? Because that's what the charm of the Gatekeeper is, what makes the game such, I don't know. There's such a charm because there's so much humor behind it. It's dark and scary, but there's some sass in there. So how much direction did
Yeah.
they give you as far as the
Um,
personality?
not a lot. Having said that, there was a director, Ian Gilmore, who was really helpful, but I think he was also smart enough to know that kind of when I was on a roll, just let me go. And because I was reading it, and because sometimes, to be honest, I was reading that as I'm performing it, I'm seeing it for the first time. It's not like I'd studied
Oh,
the scripts overnight and came back and then sort of had an idea of what I was going to do. So I was honestly just kind of reacting to what was happening in the moment.
wow. Okay.
So I think when I was on a roll, they'd just let me go and we'd get some variation in there. And but then sometimes I suppose they either wanted a different slight. I mean, we didn't do very much retaking at all that I recall. So they might just say, just be careful of this or be careful of that. They were particularly concerned, I remember, with the eye movement, trying to keep so it didn't look like I was
Doesn't look
reading.
tracking. Yeah.
So they'd keep an eye on that. But I mean, it was very collaborative. And I mean, as I say, often the best directors, if things are going well, they kind of get out of your way because I think if something like that, if I was being micromanaged, it would be very difficult, and there wouldn't be time
Mm-hmm.
basically to
Mm-hmm.
get through that amount of material. So it was a pretty relaxed. We worked very hard and we worked at a pace, but the atmosphere on set was very relaxed. They were very supportive of me, as I say, and we had to make sure I kept vocally, like had my herbal teas and all that to keep the voice okay. And yeah, we just kept working through it.
Mm-hmm. And then, so this was actually only something I stumbled upon today, but did you do the performance of Khufu the Mummy in the sequel board game?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I figured because I had never played that one, but I was just going through different videos on YouTube. And I was like, I swear that's David as well.
Yeah, that was hard. I don't think that was the original idea, and I think they had another actor in mind, or maybe even had started. I'm not quite sure, but for whatever reasons, and I really can't recall, it didn't work out. And firstly, they still had the head cast done of me so that they could make the other
Oh,
prosthetics for
okay.
that character in a reasonably quick time. So you didn't have to do a full cast of somebody different.
Mm-hmm.
Although a funny story with that, I had kept my head cast, which kind of looks a bit like a death mask, I'd kept it in the garden because it was a bit weird, but it just kind of looked okay in the garden. And then got this phone call saying, "Would like you to do Khufu?" Okay, great. Do you still have the head cast? Yes, I do. We'll get a courier, come and pick it up, take it over. They took it over, and they were starting to work on it. And as you're aware, Australia's the land of things that kill you.
Yeah.
And out of my head cast crawls a redback spider, which is one of our most venomous spiders. I didn't know it was there. The courier didn't discover it, but they did while they were working on it to make the new
Oh
prosthetic.
my
But anyway,
gosh.
they made the new prosthetic for Khufu, and it was a similar process. The difficulty with that, though, was trying to make him different from Gatekeeper,
Hmm.
and it was a different accent, which we sort of. I mean, you actually wouldn't do it these days. These days, you would get a Middle Eastern or Egyptian actor to do it.
Hmm.
But in those days, which is 20 years ago or 15 years ago, whenever we did that, I sort of was mimicking somebody from The Mummy, that Brendan Fraser
Sure.
film.
Hmm.
There was a character in that we kind of, but it was difficult to do because, as we just talked about with Gatekeeper, when I was on a roll, you're kind of just doing stuff instinctively. But if I did the same instinctive things with Khufu, it would be too similar. So it was quite hard to make him different enough. It's
Sure.
also a very different game. It's much. And only recently, when this other chap from England talked to me about it, he alerted me to all these online comments, which of course didn't exist 15, 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And Khufu's kind of dismissed as a sort of campy, silly version of the game, whereas I think
Mm.
Atmosfear is quite sinister and suspenseful,
Hmm.
and also very difficult. I mean, I tried to play Atmosphere. I can't play it. I find it a really difficult game.
Yeah,
Whereas
I mean,
Khufu's much more simple. It's a kind of a casino game, as in it's all about gambling, and it's just silly. It hasn't got the kind of, not that I don't want to be pretentious about Atmosphere. It's still just a game, but there is a slight scary element to it.
there really is, and just from the short clips I saw, as you mentioned, for Khufu's, it's like you're in the gambling casino. Just the colors and the, like, not to, I mean, atmosphere of the game is
Yeah,
very different. And I just played it Atmosphere last night with some friends, and the Gatekeeper really does get dark at moments, again, because the randomizer, I'll hear things that sometimes that catch me off guard, and I'm not even going to try to imitate you in that performance, but you say something along the lines of, like, you're taunting one of the characters and you say, like, oh, why don't you find a tall building to climb up and jump off of, it's like that, it
yeah,
gets dark, like.
yeah. It's pretty nasty. It got some of those taunts got very nasty, and it's it's quite mean,
Sure.
and deliberately so,
Oh yeah.
and jolting. I mean, all his interventions, are scary, and you jump,
Hmm.
and that's the
Hmm.
idea,
Yeah, and as the game
which they produced
progresses,
very well.
yeah, and just
I
the
think the
way
only
that.
thing with Khufu, because it was a few years later, the quality of graphics was better, just in
Hmm.
terms of the way things had developed.
Hmm.
But Khufu is a much lighter, brighter, sillier version of
Sure,
the game.
sure. And you mentioned that you've tried playing the game. So did you ever obtain a copy yourself of the games, or is that something that your friends or family have tried to play?
They sent me a copy, which was very very lovely. So I have a copy of both of them still. They actually have a CD player, which is also incredibly rare these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it did, but and there's a couple of times over the years where people have, sort of colleagues or whatever have gone, no way, you're that guy. Oh my God, I love that game. Let's play it, which I haven't, but sort of the challenge is out there. But yeah, I used to play it with my daughter, who was quite young then. So it was probably a bit advanced for, she would have been 7 or 8 or something then.
Okay.
Um, I think it's definitely an adult game.
Sure. Was she able to differentiate that's my father, or was she scared by it, or I don't
Oh
know
no,
if you
she
remember.
she knew it was me, and she
Okay.
could just roll her eyes and go, "Oh God, right."
Uh-huh, dad. Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
really take it seriously.
Sure.
I mean, with all the prosthetics, it's pretty hard to tell it's me,
Yeah.
but she knows the voice and all that sort of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, you've had colleagues say, no way, that was you. After this game, have any cool opportunities come up from doing this job? Or like, how often are you recognized for this character?
Um, Rarely, that's what's so extraordinary about speaking to you, Sydney, and also to the chap in the UK. So that's twice in the last few months. Before that, to be honest, I felt like it had kind of just not really gone anywhere. That it had just because yeah, a little part of me when we were filming was going, great, here we go, Comic Con, or it'll be some opportunity, to go and appear as this character at some, Galaxy Quest style at some thing, but none of that happened, and
Mm,
I don't know how well it sold. Um, so that's why it's lovely to hear from somebody in the UK and also from you in New York that people played it. So I as far as I remember the deal, I don't think I was on royalties, which was a mistake. Um, so I think I got a flat fee, and that was kind of it.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't actually know how well it sold and how big it was. I think it's pretty niche. So in terms of any of those opportunities that flowed, no.
Mm-hmm. I agree in the sense that anytime I pull this out to friends, they've never heard of it. But I
Yeah.
will say, in doing research, there's so many YouTube videos of people within the past year playing Atmosfear and recording
Right.
just their whole experience. And it really does feel like it has a bit of a cult following, that the people who know it love it, and
Yeah.
they have some sort of emotional attachment to it just because of nostalgia and the joy it's brought them over the years. And yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Which is nice. And look, maybe it's got some sort of retro appeal because the DVD element of it is, it's not quite like vinyl coming back in, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still slightly retro. And I guess it's for a lot of people, it's their teenage years,
Yeah.
or pre-teenage years,
Mm-hmm.
where it was obviously meant something. I mean, I'd love it if it. I think the chap in the UK told me they have done a new version apparently, which
They
they didn't
have.
ask me to do, but I'm going to presume it was because I was busy. So I think, but I don't know how that, and I presume that's for gaming or computer. So I don't know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
But there'd be something about the old school. And in fact, even when we did the DVD version, there were still people, who were very much aligned to the VHS version, the video version. They kind of
Mm-hmm.
right, that's real. That's the real atmosphere, even though that was pretty, pretty crude in its execution.
Sure. And you know what? I think that's a generational thing, because I did look up the new version that's on an app, and then you have to stream it onto your TV to play. And I'm having
Right.
that reaction. So people to the original may have reacted to yours of like, oh, this isn't the same. But that's exactly
Yeah.
how I felt about the app. I was like, this is not it. Like, this is, and also too, not to critique it too harshly, I have not played it, but the Gatekeeper is CGI. It's not a person, an actor. It's a voice actor, of course, but it's a pure
Right.
CGI as far as the character goes. Which for me, it doesn't translate the same, um, as far as the
No,
performance.
you
So
wouldn't. You wouldn't get that. I mean, yeah, you can get a lot of nuance in the voice, obviously, but it's quite a different thing. That yeah, even under all that prosthetic, it's yes, you still get a sense of my character and the twinkle in the eye or the menace or whatever. So I think that would be hard with a CGI thing.
and I imagine too, just this is an assumption, but getting into finding the character, the prosthetics, and the costume, and seeing your appearance might help a lot to find that voice. So it seems very difficult just as an outsider to have to come up with it on the spot, considering how quickly it sounds like the process was. Like, there wasn't, this
Yeah,
big development. It was just like, here's what we're doing. So yeah, but
yeah. I
um,
mean, it's a different skill, and look, there are brilliant voice actors who can do exactly that and just come up with a voice and do that sort of thing. But it's yeah. I don't know.
mhm,
I'd be interested to see it. I'll look it up after this and
mhm,
compare. But I think there's something about the person. I mean, that's why. Hopefully, actors, live actors, will never be replaced by computer
I
generated
know.
actors because it can be good, but it's not the same.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask you as well, having seen that they had released one last year, if you've ever been approached to, coming back to the Gatekeeper or just Atmosfear, because considering you played Khufu as well. But it sounds like they didn't. If it ever did come up, would you revisit that character, or are you kind of okay with it being its own little.
Oh well, no, I'd love to. It'd be great fun. He was. It was fun. I mean, it was hard work, but it's fun. And there's something about because it was. I mean, I had a wonderful team around me, but it's very much me and the camera, and that sort of concentration is fantastic to do. And it felt like actually a really satisfying creative experience. Strangely, you wouldn't necessarily think doing something like that would be satisfying creatively. I do a lot of theatre and all that sort of stuff, and but this was every fibre of my being. Even though I guess I wasn't using the body a lot, but you sort of felt like you're completely connected to the character. So no, I'd happily revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm closer to his actual age now, so that's good too.
Yeah, I know the prosthetics definitely disguise it. You could play it at any age; it'll be accessible to you forever. So
I'd need less prosthetic now. Just go, yeah, he's fine.
yeah, I know. Did they let you? I mean, speaking, you said that they let you keep the death mask. Did you get to take anything away from that as far as like? I don't know. I'm assuming you don't have the prosthetics, but that's not like a Halloween costume you can just throw on or something.
No, I don't. I don't think so. No, but there was. I mean, the prosthetics were, like thrown in the bin at the end of the day.
Mm,
So, although there may have been, no, there would have been new pieces every day, I imagine.
okay.
So no, I don't think so. And I did have the head. I think I did get the head back for a while, but then I actually just it was a bit spooky. I didn't actually like it very much, so
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
went at
Yeah.
some place when I moved house. I was like, nah,
Yeah.
it's fine in the garden, but not
With
in
the
your person.
spiders. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Cool. Great. And I guess I'll just ask you like what I like to end kind of my interviews by asking what my guest's favorite horror film is or scary movie is. Were you at
Ooh.
all like do you like horror in general or
Yes, I do. I mean, yes, I'm terrible, terrible. Like I get terribly scared.
mm-hmm.
So what did we watch the other night? That's a new one. Oh, it's newish. Barbarian. I think it's called The Barbarian. It's a
Oh,
new
yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's the bit in it where the girl goes into the spooky house and then down into the basement. And you're just going, don't do that. Don't do. What are you doing? What are you doing? And all those, horror movie tropes. And I'm a great sucker for them. I mean, and because you tend to watch them at home these days, it's I still scream. I do remember Alien and
Mm,
like that, like being terrified and screaming in the movie theater at the time.
mm-hmm.
But I also love the stupid ones, going way back to like Carry On Screaming. You probably don't know the Carry On movies; they're English movies, but
Mm,
they were basically send-ups, like Scream, sort of
okay.
thing.
Okay.
So they're fun, but they can also be pretty scary. But I don't tend to watch. I mean, I don't watch the sort of zombie stuff. That's not sort of. I'm not big on that.
Mm-hmm.
And other terrifying movies like The Shining, or I suppose that genre. I don't know what that genre would be of kind of. They're not supernatural, but they're
Maybe
within a realistic
psychological.
framework.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like
Um,
too. Yeah, I interviewed Matthew Patrick Davis, who played the mother in Barbarian, and it's interesting that you mention Alien too. It seems like there's maybe possibly a little bit of a through line of you being interested in like the character actors of horror, like
yeah,
how in those
yeah,
movies there's kind of like a character actor of some sort. But
yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's
yeah. Well,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, it's the character stuff, and then yeah, the, the story, I suppose, has got to be somewhat credible.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a whole bunch of things that happen in horror movies.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, and there is always that. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why would you go back in that house? Why? But that's the frustration. And so, as an audience, you're starting to cheer, and then you're feeling for them, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with me. I'm like so feeling so nostalgic and just grateful for your performance then and just for you taking the time to be here today now. And yeah, Atmosfear will definitely be a legacy in my household.
Great.
Yeah, so your performance will live on for a long time.
Thank you very much. It's really lovely to hear. And yeah, let's hope we're kind of some throwback. There's a big revival for it because I'll be there. Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm seriously rooting for it because I really thought it was this thing that just existed in my own bubble that I knew about. And once I went online looking into it, I was like, there really is a following to this game. So
Right.
I'm
Well,
rooting
that's
for
good to know,
that.
and thank you for helping to keep the following going with your YouTube channel.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. David was such a lovely guest to have on. Please go follow him on Instagram at Mr. David Whitney to see what work David has been up to since Atmosfear. Last year, he finished a sold-out run of Phantom of the Opera at the Sydney Opera House, and I always encourage people to support their local theater and artists. So reach out on Instagram, share some love to David on his performance in Atmosfear, and thank you so much for watching, and let me know who I should interview next. Thanks.
Time's up!